Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Tuesday, April the 26th, 2022. Sorry for the late start. For some reason, just before the show was about to begin and I was about to get the YouTube studio going, my keyboard stopped working. Don't know why that happened, but you're going to have to bear with me for just a little while here because I was not able to get all the things up in tabs to start the show with. So that'll it's going to take just a few more seconds. I got a lot of uh, Twitter links, which for some reason are difficult to open from Microsoft Word. I don't know why that would be, but we're going to start today talking about terms and conditions, particularly the terms and conditions of social media companies, which are apparently a black box that they mean whatever the social media companies say that they mean, and they don't really need to give you any kind of explanation for punishing you. And so they don't. Someone called Views and Visions was not happy about the Elon Musk takeover of Twitter. Let's see. At Vegas Visions, 80s to 90s, old reporter, loud, progressive, human, civil, press rights, veteran, United States Coast Guard, cancer survivor, Black Lives Matter, climate crisis, stand with Ukraine, Ukrainian flag. Well, it's almost all there. At Vegas Visions had tweeted, the scary part about Elon Musk buying Twitter is realizing none of the right-wing lunatics cheering him on for free speech know the difference between the First Amendment and social media terms of service. Okay. Well, let's go first to Alex Berenson on that. He has a post up 8 hours ago on his Substack. I'm for free speech, but just stop blue checks. You are either for the right to free expression or against it. There is no but. I have to enter a cavil here. Free expression is not the same as free speech. Free expression is the Trojan horse that got pornography protected, among other things. In any event, Berenson begins, the liberal screaming following Elon Musk's deal to buy Twitter is quite something. People who make their lives speaking as reporters or commentators have launched a full-throated attack on the idea that Twitter might return to its roots as a platform for unfettered and censor-free speech. Not so very long ago, Twitter understood its role. When I joined in 2009, its terms of service explicitly declaimed censorship, or disdained, I suppose that should be. Not my error. Quote, all content is the sole responsibility of the person who originated such content. We may not monitor or control the content, and we cannot take responsibility for such content. Any use or reliance on any content or materials posted via the services or obtained by you through the services is at your own risk, unquote. Berenson continues, the exceptions were quite narrow and reasonable, the same kind of speech that would have been illegal or civilly liable offline, child pornography, specific violent threats encouraging suicide, etc. Now, of course, Twitter's terms of service and the specific rules about what tweets are allowed are a giant mess. They stretch for pages and pages and include categories and subcategories and strikes and warnings about COVID and vaccines and elections and the best way to make ramen. I'm making that last one up, but wait for it. Worse, Twitter's enforcement procedures are entirely arbitrary. As we have pointed out in Berenson v. Twitter, Twitter will not and cannot articulate how two tweets, which got him suspended, or my earlier supposedly problematic tweets led to my expulsion by violating its stated COVID rules, because they did not. The answer is simple. Twitter needs to go back to its earlier era when people were allowed to say what they thought. Will the service be filled with ugliness and porn and nasty discourse? Sure. Newsflash, it's filled with those things now. Human beings like to say nasty things to each other and talk and look dirty. And I'm not going to repeat the examples which he embedded. Berenson continues, don't shoot the messenger. And are dictatorships likely to use an uncensored Twitter to make dissidents uncomfortable? Sure. Newsflash, dictatorships don't need Twitter to do that. The easiest answer for Twitter will be to say, hey, Saudi Arabia, we don't censor, period. Not in the US and not anywhere else. Not you, not the people criticizing you. You want to block us, fine. But all those investors you are trying to court, they may wonder why. In a few months, after Elon has taken Twitter back to its roots, the service will be just like it is now, only with more viewpoints and more debate. And this controversy will seem as bizarre as the argument over whether schools should have been closed for COVID. The same woke geniuses frothing at the mouth now about free speech will be running from their positions, just as they ran from their views on schools. But for the moment, Elon isn't in charge. I'm still blocked, and Berenson v. Twitter will go forward. In fact, I'm going to have some other interesting legal news regarding the Little by early next week. The first hearing on the case is in federal court in San Francisco Thursday. Let's get ready to rumble. Meanwhile, the planted axiom, as James Burnham would say, in these people moaning about private companies and their terms of service is that if it's not the government censoring you, well, private companies can do whatever they like. This is not true, and there is case law to support it. I'm reading from Wikipedia here. Marsh v. Alabama 326 U.S. 501, 1946, was a case decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, which ruled that a state trespassing statute could not be used to prevent the distribution of religious materials on a town's sidewalk, even though the sidewalk was part of a privately owned company town. The court based its ruling on the provisions of the First and 14th Amendments. The town of Chickasaw, Alabama, was predominantly a Gulf Shipbuilding Corporation company town near Mobile, Alabama, and was owned and operated by the Gulf Shipbuilding Corporation. The town exhibited the general characteristics of a more traditional settlement. Its policeman was a deputy from the Mobile County Sheriff's Department who was paid by Gulf. The Supreme Court noted that the residents of the non-Gulf neighborhoods were freely allowed to use the company-owned streets and sidewalks to access the town's businesses and facilities. The appellant, Grace Marsh, a Jehovah's Witness, stood near the post office one day and began distributing religious literature. Marsh was warned that she needed a permit to do so and none would be issued to her. When she was asked to leave, she refused on the grounds that the company rules against distribution of such materials could not be constitutionally applied to her. The deputy sheriff arrested her, and she was charged with the Alabama Criminal Code's trespassing equivalent. Well, you can go to supreme.justia.com and you can find the full verdict of this. Syllabus 1, a state cannot, consistently with the freedom of religion and the press guaranteed by the First and 14th Amendments, impose criminal punishment on a person for distributing religious literature on the sidewalk of a company-owned town, contrary to regulations of the town's management. But it goes much more broad than this. The court, in its judgment, wrote, ownership does not mean absolute dominion. The more an owner, for his advantage, opens up his property for use by the public in general, the more do his rights become circumscribed by the statutory and constitutional rights of those who use it. So-called conservatives, well, serious conservatives like David A. French and the like, will argue that, oh, no, this is just about evil government and not about big business, which is wonderful, uniformly wonderful. No, that is not the case. The Supreme Court held that the founding fathers saw free speech as an absolute good, not merely something that was to be protected against government. I don't know how anyone could otherwise regard the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Here's more from the verdict. When we balance the constitutional rights of owners of property against those of the people to enjoy freedom of press and religion, as we must here, we remain mindful of the fact that the latter occupy a preferred position. As we've stated before, the right to exercise the liberty safeguarded by the First Amendment, quote, lies at the foundation of free government by free men, and we must in all cases weigh the circumstances and appraise the reasons in support of the regulation of the rights, unquote. So there you have it. Well, no, here's more. Certainly, the corporation can no more deprive people of freedom of press and religion than it can discriminate against commerce. Well, yeah, I think this is pretty clear. Don't you think? But no, the conservative movement, so-called, worships mammon, worships Hollywood, it worships Disney, it worships Google and Facebook. Well, there you go. And as I say, this argument, again, this question has been decided by the Supreme Court. Stare decisis, I think, would apply here. Let's go to the chat. Hello to Anran Dan, Pupcastle88, Chogakin 666, Don from Beyond, Denny McDougall. Oh, Twitter has become literal Nazis, says Chogakin 666. Chogakin 666 says also, yay, Ukrainian militias. Hello to William Hicks and Don Willis. And this Twitter story has become, well, hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. This is from Chris Menahan at Information Liberation. Amazon's Jeff Bezos Monday attacked Elon Musk as a Chinese agent after news came out of a successful buyout of Twitter, as other people have pointed out. How much of the rubbish, the fake rubbish that you buy from Amazon comes from China? Bezos tweeted, interesting question. Did the Chinese government just gain a bit of leverage over the town square? This was in response to a tweet from Peking Mike, who said, apropos of something, Tesla's second biggest market in 2021 was China. Chinese battery makers are major suppliers for Tesla's electric vehicles. After 2009, when China banned Twitter, the government there had almost no leverage over the platform. That may have just changed. Legendary comedian Sam Hyde fired back and tested out Twitter's new free speech policies at the time with his new account. And I'm not going to repeat what Sam Hyde has to say. It is thoroughly obscene. But I checked, and as of about an hour ago, he still had his account. Bezos had more to say. My own answer to this question is probably not. The more likely outcome in this regard is complexity in China for Tesla rather than censorship at Twitter. And he added, but we'll see. Musk is extremely good at navigating this kind of complexity. And more hilarity to come from Emily Birnbaum and Betsy Woodruff Swan at Politico. Monday was an emotional day at Twitter, even for its executives. Shortly after billionaire Elon Musk bought the powerful social media platform, top Twitter lawyer Vijaya Gadde called a virtual meeting with the policy and legal team she oversees to discuss what the new ownership could mean for them. Gadde cried during the meeting as she expressed concerns about how the company could change, according to three people familiar with the meeting. She acknowledged that there are significant uncertainties about what the company will look like under Musk's leadership. Twitter spokesperson Trenton Kennedy said Gadde became emotional when discussing her team's impact and the pride she feels in them. Sources confirmed that she spoke at length about how she is proud of the work her team has done and offered employees encouragement, urging them to keep striving to do good at the company. Gadde, who has worked at Twitter since 2011, is the key executive charged with overseeing Twitter's trust and safety, legal and public policy functions. She is seen internally as Twitter's moral authority and the executive tasked with handling sensitive issues like harassment and dangerous speech. Gaddy played a leading role in negotiating the deal between Twitter and Musk, according to one person familiar with the dynamics. She has shepherded Twitter through some of its most contentious political battles, including the decisions to remove all political advertising and to boot former President Donald Trump from the platform in the wake of the January 6th attack on Capitol Hill, a position that has earned her devoted fans within Twitter, as well as a large contingent of right-wing critics. I think everyone at Twitter, regardless of how they feel about the news, is feeling rather reflective and emotional, said one Twitter employee. We've gone through a lot in the past 2 years, and I think it's generally instigated a lot of reflection. I think this was more of an acknowledgement of the uncertainty everyone is feeling right now. Yes, let's shed some tears for this model minority and master of censorship. It's from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. After confirmation that Elon Musk had bought Twitter in a $44 billion deal, founder Jack Dorsey praised the entrepreneur for taking it back from Wall Street. Following Musk's purchase of the social media network, which prompted a deluge of hysteria from censorship-happy leftists, Dorsey outlined his response in a lengthy tweet thread. Quote, Elon's goal of creating a platform which is maximally trusted and broadly inclusive is the right one. This is also Twitter CEO Parag Agrawal's goal, if you say so, Paul, and if you say so, Jack. And that's why I chose him. Thank you both for getting the company out of an impossible situation. This is the right path. I believe it with all my heart, unquote. Well, Parag Agrawal said publicly that the First Amendment does not apply. Nope. It doesn't. Twitter can do whatever it wants. It's not a free speech zone. It is a law unto itself. Dorsey added, taking it back from Wall Street is the correct first step. Twitter will continue to serve the public conversation. Watson comments, it remains to be seen whether that conversation will include prominent individuals previously banned by Twitter, such as President Trump or Alex Jones. And I read elsewhere that Alex Jones has formally applied to be reinstated. And more hilarity from James Gant and Harriet Alexander of the Daily Mail. Twitter staff are told in emergency meeting that their jobs are only safe for 6 months until Musk completes his $44 billion takeover, as they demand to know if they will be forced to return to the office. Some Twitter staff have reacted with horror to Elon Musk's takeover of the company, according to internal chats shared online. The company has frozen planned changes to the service until Friday, amid what Bloomberg speculated was concern that a rogue employee could push something or mess with the product on the way out the door. In message rooms, staff vented about their trepidation over working for the mercurial South African. Others in a staff meeting held at 5 p.m. Worried whether they would still be able to work from home and asked about their share options. CEO Parag Agrawal told staff that their jobs were safe for the moment, saying there would be no layoffs until Musk took over in 6 months, and reassuring them about their stock options and benefits. He would not be drawn on whether Donald Trump would be allowed back to the platform. Trump said on Monday he has no wish to. Agrawal said he was proud of our teams and inspired by the work that has never been more important. Yeah. And, well, let's get to the crybaby tears. Yes, internal lockdown. Pushing means to upload a software revision. I learned that from the HBO show Silicon Valley. And yes, as for the tears. Oh, no. Well, here's some tears. This is from Steve Watson at Summit News. MSNBC host Ari Melber, another model minority, is suddenly very worried about censorship and the silencing of political figures on Twitter impacting U.S. elections, but only after Elon Musk bought the platform. Melber spewed that now Musk is in charge, he might be able to deplatform and ban politicians he doesn't support or turn down their reach. He panicked, quote, If you own all of Twitter or Facebook or what have you, you don't have to explain yourself. You don't even have to be transparent. You could secretly ban one party's candidate or all of its candidates or all of its nominees, or you could just secretly turn down the reach of their stuff, turn up the reach of something else. The rest of us might not even find out about it until after the election, unquote. Okay. Does this fellow, Ari Melber, not understand that this is what has been done? This throttling, shadow banning, etc., has been done to me by Twitter pretty much continuously and to millions of people like me for the last 5 years, or that Twitter has routinely throttled or outright banned politicians, including no less than the sitting president of the United States. How obtuse is Ari Melber? Well, that's a trick question, isn't it? And tears, leaving Twitter, dump Twitter, etc., that is trending on Twitter. Again, from Summit News. After Elon Musk finally bought Twitter, promising to restore free speech to the platform, leftists began to promise to cancel themselves by deleting their accounts, causing a hashtag leaving Twitter to trend. It's the logical endpoint for crying cancel zealots threatening to cancel themselves because they can no longer cancel everyone else. And a lot of amusing memes. Jamil tweeted, he got Twitter. I would like this to be what lies here is my last tweet. Just really any excuse to show pictures of Barreled. That's a yappy little dog. I fear this free speech bid is going to help this hell platform reach its final form of totally lawless hate, bigotry, and misogyny. Well, that's the dream, isn't it? Best of luck. It's difficult for me to understand how a woman as good looking as Jamil and as successful can be as bitter as she is. But I suppose there's certain people who have gotten used to always getting their way. And well, Sean King, what do they call him? Talcum X, or a new one I found today, Marshmallow Luther King. He deleted his account, and then I suppose he reconsidered, thinking this would make him look hysterical. And then he reinstated his account and started screaming profanities at people, saying, oh, it had been hacked. Oh, yes, of course. Of course it was hacked. Of course. Just at this very moment, it was hacked. Oh, yes, more from Jamil. One good thing about Elon buying Twitter is that I will finally leave and stop being a complete menace to society on here. So it's a win-win for you all, really. Well, can't argue with that. Talcum X had tweeted, at its root, Elon Musk wanting to purchase Twitter is not about left versus right. It's about white power. The man was raised in apartheid by a white nationalist. He's upset that Twitter won't allow white nationalists to target or harass people. That's his definition of free speech. Chuck Ross tweeted, Sean King apparently deleted his Twitter. I guess he won't be using the platform to falsely accuse guys of murdering children before they commit suicide anymore. And yes, that actually happened. Chuck Ross had reported 3 years ago a Houston area man whose social media activist Sean King falsely accused of murdering a 7-year-old black girl late in 2018 has died from an apparent suicide after hanging himself in his jail cell earlier in July. Houston's ABC and Fox stations reported that Robert Cantrell, 49, was found dead July 23rd. He had been in Montgomery County, just outside of Houston, since December 30th of 2018 on evasion and robbery charges. Cantrell was arrested the same day Jasmine Barnes was gunned down while riding in a car with her mother and siblings. Barnes' death gained national attention because her mother, LaPortia Washington, alleged the shooter was white. Washington alleged the murder was a hate crime, as did Texas Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. A composite sketch of the alleged shooter resembled Cantrell. King, who is closely associated with the Black Lives Matter movement, mounted a private investigation of his own into the murder, offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to the killer's arrest. He worked closely with Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez on the investigation. King posted Cantrell's mugshot on Twitter in January, asking his followers for more information on Cantrell, who was white. He also said Cantrell was a racist, violent asshole. What more can you tell me about Robert Cantrell? King wrote. He was arrested in Houston hours after Jasmine was murdered on another violent crime spree. We've had 20 people call or email us and saying he's a racist, violent asshole and always has been. Just tell me everything you know. Gonzalez circulated the composite sketch of Barnes's killer, which was drawn up by celebrity sketch artist Lois Gibson. He posted multiple retweets of the composite that included the hashtag Justice for Jasmine. It turned out that King was wrong, not just about the identity of Barnes's killers, but also their race. Eric Black and Larry Woodruff were arrested January 6th. Both men are Black. They face capital murder charges. Sean King deleted his post accusing Cantrell of murder. There was also evidence that he and Gonzalez had received a tip that Black was involved in the shooting a day before King posted Cantrell's mug shot. So that is the kind of man that Sean King is. Matthew VDR, Vox Day Respecter, sent me a picture of Sean King relaxing outdoors. And I noted that his legs are pastier than mine are. But of course, we all know that Black men have to be very, careful in the sun because, they're just not used to the sun. It's best for them to stay out of the sun. Max Boot, crazy name, crazy guy, tweeted, I still fear that having Elon Musk take over Twitter is bad for democracy, as I argued, but I fervently hope he proves me wrong. He can do some good if he cleans out the bots and fine-tunes rather than jettisons the content moderation policies. Oh, and let's hear from Joy and Reed. If he really thinks he can create that same toxic high school bully 80s South Africa world here, is that what 80s South Africa was like? It was like high school? Was it? What kind of high school did Joyanne Reed go to? And somehow monetize that. He should maybe stick to sending compensatory technology to near space for his fellow men with more money and time on their hands than interesting ideas. Joyanne Reed has never had an interesting idea in her life, let alone one single idea. More from Joyanne. This platform is super useful as a news aggregator, a good place to follow journalists, creators, thinkers, and interesting people not in the biz. But posting on here is often viewed by too many on the right as an invitation to harassment. That's the world Elon created at Tesla. Well, no, it isn't. Joyanne Reed goes on her MSNBC show pretty much every night saying that white people are scum. They're the cancer of human history. And of course, that has no negative or societal, political or societal consequences. Steve Watson says Elon Musk is from South Africa, so that means he loves white nationalism. Yeah, okay. Just like every German is a Nazi. Good logic. Now cry some more. Dean Obaidallah tweeted, Elon Musk buying Twitter is a dream come true for white nationalists. After all, Musk is from the former apartheid country of South Africa, which the white supremacists idolize. Do they? I don't really hear a lot of talk about South Africa from anybody these days. Oh, more paranoia from Dean Obaidallah. Wonder if Elon Musk will copy the apartheid rules of his home country, South Africa, and give us check marks based on our skin color. The whiter the check mark, the more rights you have on Twitter. Again, I'm tempted to joke. That's the dream. I mean, if you're going to hand me a punchline like that, David Weissman, I still think Elon Musk owning Twitter is a bad idea. He will amplify racist bigots and misinformation. He is a bad faith actor with his distorted views of free speech and censorship. Well, of course, David Weissman could tell you that free speech is whatever he approves. Anything that he disapproves of is hate speech and thus not protected by the First Amendment. When an oligarch buys a communication platform to distribute right-wing propaganda, that's not democracy, said Jennifer Mercia. Okay, and much. Nikki Fink. I know who she is. She's an entertainment reporter. I had no idea that she was like this. So when Elon Musk takes control of Twitter and turns it into a malevolent mouthpiece, where should Democrats and progressives go for free speech on social media? An existing site, or do we start our own? Golly, I hope that there are some of you progressives who know how to code. And it goes on and on and on and on. And I think I will just leave it at that. I'll return in a minute. Buddy Duddyful says, KMG, have you heard of the practice of going free of the anti-white narrative? No, I haven't, and I don't know what that means. If one wanted to be free of the anti-white narrative, one would pretty much have to live in a Skinner box. Frothing Fanboy, hello, says, does anyone think that everything is going to be cool now that Libertarian Musk owns Twitter? LOL, name me any plutocrat who has ever had anything other than his own interests in mind. Well, look, to be fair to Elon Musk, and I've never been a fan of his, I will say this. He put up his own money to buy a company which was, pretty much a financial disaster. He doesn't get anything out of this personally, except with regard to any changes that he might make to Twitter in order to make it a better platform. I particularly enjoyed the hysteria and hypocrisy of that malignant dwarf, Robert Reich, says Anne Run. Reich? Wow. Can you possibly come up with a more Nazi name than Reich? I mean, come on, why should we listen to that guy? Hello, buddy, who says, Kevin, good evening from your faithful affiliate from sunny but cool Midwest USA. Say the work and I will broadcast. Cry closets were overbooked at Twitter HQ yesterday, says Dan. Can't he just mass fire these nerds? Well, that's what happened at Red Bull. Actually, Red Bull shuttered a whole bunch of departments. Marketing departments, outreach departments, or whatever. I don't know, whoever, the fellow who runs it decided that there was nothing to be done. So you just closed them down. Yeah, it sounds like a good idea to me. The Elon Musk says, here's the deal. I'm going to give you cash, cash. That's right, cash on the barrelhead if you leave. Just draw up a list of people, or anyone who wants to leave will get a really hefty payout. I mean, relatively hefty, I mean, that's not even counting their stock options. Of course, if they're canned, in 6 months and their options are not vested, then they are SOL. And I can see the headlines as Anron, Little League Baseball game disrupted by far-right podcast. Well, I don't want to be the, actually guy. You remember the controversy between Red Letter Media and William Shatner, where he just kept going on, I don't appear on podcasts, and there was this sort of vain explanation from various fans of Red Letter Media to explain what Red Letter Media was and that it wasn't a podcast, but William Shatner wasn't having it. He wasn't having it. Hello to Gamion. Are you playing that guy who says boo again, says Buddy? Don Willis says, I'm cynical and distrustful of elite players, but take solace in the fact that the White House and all news orgs are freaking out about Elon. I'm hoping this works out in freedom's favor. Hello to Dionysus. Jim Smith, hello, says Ari Melber may be the leading liberal propagandist on MSNBC. I was going to tweet a picture of his ex-wife today because she's one of those women who has a totally different look in every picture that you see of her. And she had a picture taken of herself with wild hair piled up in the air, multicolored, and wearing a sort of faux military uniform. And I thought, what is this? Is this Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Death Club band? Hello to Phil the Kill, who says, let us hope the Elon thing is not gaslighting similar to the Trump hysteria. I don't think Trump was gaslighting us. Hello to Brian Frakes. And quite the analogy, Joy, says Dan. Do we have any? My Trail of Disgrace, hello, says Sam Hyde has had that account at Wigger. He purchased specifically to get that name for a couple of years, but used it only sporadically for merch and upload news. His original accounts were banned earlier. Chogaken 666 says grape soda is good. Can't agree. Grape juice is better. And run. Yeah, I don't know. I remember once. Well, we used to get I used to be the letters editor of Alberta and BC Report, and we used to get these letters from fundamentalist Christians insisting that Jesus Christ would never touch alcohol, and that the wine mentioned in the Gospels at the wedding in Cana was not wine, of course, it was grape juice. And I thought that must be why all of the people there were so excited by the miracle. Oh, look, free grape juice. Why can't they be happy with a substantial payday, says Brian Frakes. Well, it looks like that Jack, founder of Twitter, his payday is going to be almost $1 billion. So he will be, if he is not currently, once again, a member of the Three Commas Club. Don Willis says, I'm white from the South and spent time deep South. I can count the number of Nazis or Nazi talk on one hand. Well, I'm reminded in the 1964 election that the Republican candidate was a man called Barry Goldwater. And of course, Goldwater is a Jewish name and originally Goldwasser. And the family owned a department store in Phoenix called Goldwater's, which is, a very Jewish thing to do. Barry Goldwater said he was Episcopalian. That was the official line. As far as I could tell, he was a stone atheist. The reason I mention this is that Goldwater took, I believe, 6 states only in the 1964 election. One of them barely was his home state of Arizona. The other 5 states were Cotton South states. And looking at that, it seemed to me that people in the Deep South, not very anti-Semitic. Look to Phil the Kill. Yes, that was Susan Sontag's line, says Anron. Yes, about the white race being the cancer of human history. Indeed it was. Goldwater girls were sexy, says Dawn Willis. And let's get back to it here. Oh, yes. We've detected unusual activity from your computer network. Why? Because I opened a link from Microsoft Word. Oh, no, not just press, but press and hold. Oh, wait, it's scrolling there. The little pill is filling up with black. Is this actually going to load? Can you look? Yeah, here we go. This is from Timothy L. O'Brien, who's a senior columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. Not just a columnist, but a senior columnist. Musk is the wrong leader for Twitter's vital mission. Oh, yes, so much concern trolling. So much concern trolling. But journalism, the noble profession of journalism, the noble media companies, according to senior columnist O'Brien, Media companies also provide a public service. In an ideal world, responsible media companies keep users informed, monitor how power is used, and how society evolves, and provide forums for ideas. Musk has used social media to play games with his business interests, troll those he doesn't like, and run afoul of the law and regulators. None of that is a recipe for enlightened media management. Keeping users informed and monitoring how power is used. Apparently, these are code words for shilling for Hollywood, Big Pharma, and the deep state. How about killing that New York Post story about Hunter Biden's laptop? Just shortly before the 2020 presidential election. Was that keeping people informed? Was everyone else falling in lockstep with this decision by Twitter and Facebook, such as NPR? Was that keeping people informed? As Ann Applebaum says, oh, it's not an interesting story. Oh, it's not an interesting story. The New York Post thought it was an interesting story, and the New York Post has been very successful for quite a long time in printing stories that a great many readers find interesting. Pompous ass. It's just, that's the line. Oh, yes. It's not, I suppose, Twitter can be bought by anyone, but, would that be responsible? Was it responsible for, I don't know, for the US government to allow the Walt Disney Company to practically have a monopoly on movie screens in the United States? Was that responsible? Oh, and Taylor Lorenz, Brian Paris comments, blue checks have been reduced to posting QAnon grandma tier clickbait pastas. Taylor Lorenz tweeted a PSA. That's what she calls it. Deadline tomorrow, 3 exclamation points. I do not give Twitter, Elon Musk, or any entities associated permission to use my pictures, information, messages, or posts, both past and future. With this statement, I give notice to Twitter and Mr. Musk. It is strictly forbidden to disclose, copy, distribute, or take any other action against me based on this profile and or its contents. The content of this profile is private and confidential information. The violation of privacy can be punished by law, USC 1308, 11308, 103, and the Rome Statute. No, Twitter is now a private entity. Not quite yet. All members must post a note like this. If you prefer, you can copy and paste this version. If you do not publish a statement at least once, it will be tactically allowing the use of your photos as well as the information contained in the profile status updates. Do not share. I have noticed, you may have noticed, a great many people saying, oh, Elon Musk is going to be going through our DMs. I have thousands of DMs. But, what is it that these people are so worried about? Parag could have gone through your DMs, but apparently Elon Musk going through your DMs. What kind of conversations are you having on your DMs, Taylor? Huh? And other people? I mean, I don't know. It sounds pretty spicy. I don't know. Perhaps erotic. This meme gets better and better. Taylor Lorenz is 49 years old. Now it's changed to Taylor Lorenz is 51 years old. I tweeted this morning, the same people who, 1, entertain lurid death fantasies about J.K. Rowling, 2, actually threaten to maim or kill J.K. Rowling, 3, promise gratefully to punch TERFs, are the same people mewling about the disappearance of decency following Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. But that's because they're, shameless. And I don't really expect them to change. When you were screaming obscenities at the President of the United States on Twitter, that is, well, that's not indecent. It's the opposite of indecent because, Orange Man bad. And from George Alexopoulos, a cartoon. Breaking, white man deletes Sean King's Twitter account. And it's very funny. Panel 1, will you oppress me? And there is a brush in some dark makeup. I'd oppress me. Makeup being applied to face. I'd oppress me hard on the lips. And then the Black Power salute and tears falling. And Taylor Lorenz is a liar, and Brian Stelter is a liar, and pretty much everyone at CNN is a liar, and MSNBC is a liar, because we know for a fact, we have the evidence, that the original version of Taylor Lorenz's story about libs of TikTok had a link to information which hackers got about a real estate company owned or controlled by the woman behind libs of TikTok, which included her address. This was later stripped from the story because, I don't know, could get us into trouble or something. And the Washington Post, and Taylor Lorenz, and all of her standers, she did not dox anyone. They're all liars. Tim Pool tweeted, the Washington Post and Taylor Lorenz doxed libs of TikTok. They included a link to private work details and address listed as libs of TikTok's private home. They lied about it, so I got an ad in Times Square calling them out. And the ad says, hey, WAPO, democracy dies in darkness. That's why we're shining a light on you. Hey, yes. Yeah. And so Taylor Lorenz is now mewling about harassment. She's mewling about harassment. You know, I'm not going to say that all women should just stay off social media, but maybe they should. I mean, this woman who runs Libs of TikTok is very good at it. I think she understands that her work, even though it's just repeating what other people have produced, is provocative, and it's there's going to be pushback. Taylor Lorenz does not do this. Megan McArdle, who is apparently some big-brained woman, and is a libertarian or some such, whatever that means these days. She takes a very nuanced stand about this, very, very nuanced. It will be much, much harder than most people think to remake Twitter as free speech, Inc. Twitter's moderation policies are more driven by its left-leaning customer base, the preferences of advertisers who don't want to offend said base. Does anyone pay attention to Twitter ads? I don't. They just, I scroll past them. It's just like they're invisible. The cultural preferences of its progressive junior staff, who can be fired. That's me, not Megan McArdle. He could certainly order people to take the heavy hands off the ban hammer, but day in and day out, it is still lower-level employees who would be making the ban decisions, because nobody wants an actually unmoderated platform full of spam and child porn. No matter what new policies Musk sets, there will be gray areas, and it is Twitter's progressive workforce, not Elon Musk, who will be making the calls in those gray areas. Again, Megan, who a champion of free enterprise, does not understand that these people can be fired. I responded to her, is that an order that, the progressive workforce will be making the calls in those gray areas, or merely your most fervent desire? Also, kudos on conflating free speech with child porn. Maybe to libertarians such as Megan McArdle, they are the same. It wouldn't surprise me. Actually, it's all expression, right? It's your daily reminder that libertarianism is weaponized autism. Here's let me just open these other couple of things here. The problem with putting a bunch of links to Twitter to get them ready or put them in a Microsoft Word file is that unless you label them all, when you look at what the Twitter URL says, it gives you no indication of what the content is. And so sometimes I put these things up out of order, but that's on you, babe, as that Chechen gangster would say, from Barry, which is returning. Okay, so yes, Razor Fist says this Cope tweet may actually be more hilarious than Talcum X quitting Twitter. You wish, 12-letter obscenity. I didn't delete my account. You literally made that up. I was getting death threats, sure you were, and hack attempts from your buddies who stormed the Capitol and had to make it more secure. What was that, your Twitter account or the Capitol? I'm right here, and you are a white supremacist. Sure thing. Sure thing. Carl Stack, Substack, has a piece, The Slime Machine Targeting Libs of TikTok, the tale of how Taylor Lorenz was used like a puppet by German intelligence. You know, there's advantages to being a woman, particularly a girly girl like Taylor Lorenz, is that a great many men, including myself most of the time, think, I don't want to pick on a woman because, I mean, how much does Taylor Lorenz actually have to do with the stuff that goes up, with her name attached to it on the Washington Post? In this case, well, yes, German intelligence was behind this story. And as I say, you can find this at Carl Stack, Carl with a K, carlstack.substack.com. But here's something about changes in society. Someone called Ashy printed a disturbing picture of an office with a whole bunch of computers and keyboards and monitors. And we have 4 people sleeping. 4 people, one's sleeping in a chair, which the back has gone considerably far back, and 3 people sleeping on what might be called beds. They're all women, disturbingly. Normalize maps at work. That's what it says. And someone called Franklin at Franklin VH2 responded, normalize living at work, normalize never leaving work in your life, normalize strict 8-hour sleep schedules, normalize test tube babies so that women can continue to work while the workforce is reproduced. If people can wake up and do some work immediately, we can improve our GDP by 1%. This is absolutely horrific. No, why would you want to go home? This is your home. The office is your home. We've got beds for you to sleep, and we got personalized chefs, and we have foosball tables and ping pong tables and candy walls. So a private life, what are you talking about, a private life? That's pretty dangerous talk. You know, how can you have a private life? Define private life. I mean, you think private thoughts when you're here, right? This is the best incubator of private thoughts, the workplace. There's nothing that you can't share with us here. Well, you don't want to put that one to the test, do you? William Briggs talks to us about the praxis of surrender, which is what Conservatism Inc. does, or just to be more honest and more succinct, conservatism does. It is a modus operandi for surrender. And you get patted on the back. And sometimes if you're, lucky, like Ross Douthat, you get a job at the New York Times, which I would have to guess pays fairly well. And of course, if you have a permanent columnist slot at the New York Times, this can be leveraged to other lucrative work, including personal appearances, speeches, that sort of thing. So it's a good gig to have. William Briggs, the statistician to the Stars, wrote 4 days ago, one of the best known observations on our side is that conservatives surrender. They never conserve anything and are always well pleased to be seen as not causing too much trouble. Well, this is clear and obvious. Less well known is how surrender happens. We've all read scores of the conservative case for articles, but these always appear at the end of the battle, making the surrender formal, like signing a peace treaty. The real work of bowing to decadence begins before these appear. Let's see how it's done in one of the main organs of regime propaganda, the New York Times itself, in a piece by one of its staff conservatives, Ross Douthat. The piece is called How to Make Sense of the New Alphabet People War. Ostensibly, this is a piece that surveys transgender mania and says, in language New York Times readers believe is spoken by deplorables, hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right. Let's slow down and take a good long think about what's going on here. You might be pleased to call a man mama now, but you all could end up feeling nasty bad about what you're doing. Suitably admonished by the very real power of the press, the woke will cease pushing so hard for insanity to be official policy. But neither will they, of course, cease pushing altogether. Here's the admonishment bit people are quoting, coming right at the end of Douthat's piece. Quote, I will make a prediction within a not too short a span of time, not only conservatives, but most liberals will recognize they've been running an experiment on trans-identifying youth without good or certain evidence, inspired by ideological motives rather than scientific rigor, in a way that future generations will regard as a grave medical political scandal. Which means that if you are a liberal who believes as much already but don't feel comfortable saying it, your silence will eventually become your regret, unquote. To which I say, ooh, a grave medical political scandal. Really? So there are people's careers get ruined, they get fired, they get bankrupted, they get pushed out of polite society. Who is punished for the AIDS hysteria, for the AZT mass murder, for the lobotomy craze, for the war on saturated fat, for defining homosexuality as a mental illness and then electroshocking homosexuals? Who was punished for Vioxx? One of the many pharmaceutical examples. Who was punished for mask mandates? Well, for the whole COVID-19 hysteria. Who was punished for vaccine mandates? Who was punished for statutory distancing? Who was punished for closing schools or for vaccinating children? Who was punished for any of that? Nobody was punished for any of it because no one is punished. You see, here's how it works. It's the science. And you had better agree with the science and say so publicly. Because if you don't, you're anti-science, which means you're a troglodyte and you deserve to be canceled. Oh, wait a minute. We have an update. That used to be the science, but now, yeah, we have difficult people, so we're going to cut out part of their brains. How about we just stop talking about that and maybe people will forget that we ever did that? Because that's not the science anymore. That's the way that it always happens. You know, Thomas Szasz, a big influence on my thinking. He was a Jewish atheist. He was a very honest man. He wrote, going back to the 1970s, that in the Middle Ages, when it was believed that God owned your body, there was very little that doctors could do to it. Now, in the age of scientism, when the medical profession owns your bodies, there is nothing that the medical profession, doctors cannot do to it. But back to William Briggs. Sounds as if it's a straightforward reality-based spanking, which, because of where it was presented, gives one hope. Yet its placement, naturally enough, sucks away some of the dissident energy to fight. Why struggle if the battle is won? This is a key component of surrender. False signals that the battle is won or the fight is over, something too small to bother it. Yes, you can pretty much always tell a conservative because he or she is the person saying, is that the hill you want to die on? No, of course not. You don't want to die on any hill because nothing is really important. Nothing is really important except sinecures, really, and being invited to the right parties. Briggs says, let's go back to the beginning of the piece where the real spirit deflation happens. This is a popular move we can call the sly surrender. Douthit gives 3 scenarios to explain the current transanity, brief quotes, but all contain the gist. 1, quote, this is great news. Sexual fluidity, transgender, and non-binary experience are clearly intrinsic to the human experience. Our society used to suppress them with punitive heteronormativity, and only now are we getting a true picture of the real diversity of sexual attractions and gender identities. Just as, for example, we discovered that left-handedness is much more common once we stopped trying to train kids out of it, unquote. Number 2, we shouldn't read too much into it. This trend is probably mostly just young people being young people, exploring and experimenting and differentiating themselves from their elders. Number 3, this trend is bad news. Quote, what we're seeing today isn't just a continuation of the gay rights revolution, it's a form of social contagion, which our educational and medical institutions are encouraging and accelerating. So what we need now is probably more emphasis on biology, normativity, and reconciliation with your own male or femaleness, not further deconstruction, unquote. Briggs comments, the first interpretation is woke, the second progressive, and the third conservative. The first 2 are cheers for transanity, unquestioning recommendations, really, with quibbles only about the speed of implementation. These are restatements of how the woke agenda is correct. So is the third. Why? Because Douthit cannot bring himself to condemn the madness. He never defends or attempts to defend reality. His purpose is to show the left that the right is not entirely to be feared, that the right can be lived with, but certainly not capitulated to. He never shows why the first 2 interpretations are idiotic or says why they are anti-reality and anti-human. He weakens the third point with that probably more emphasis on biology. Probably. His overwhelmingly leftist readership are given a free pass to hold either the first or second interpretation and are asked only to forgive the third. If any reader should venture to the third, again, they will find no challenges to their fantasist worldview. All they will conclude is that, as in the admonition, that maybe, perhaps, kind of, sort of, we should slow down a bit here and there, maybe. The surrender has happened. It is over. The battle has been conceded, but so softly we didn't even feel the knife slipping between the shoulder blades. Now, you may say Douthit himself, in his soul of souls, condemns the madness. It is not stupid enough to fall for the idea that a man believing he is a woman is in any ways acting sanely, maybe even, Douthit, and have heard him say such things in private. It doesn't matter. He was not able to defend the idea of biology and reality-based metaphysics. He never even tried. All he could do is throw out that insipid probably. There it is, right there. This is why conservatives never win. He has surrendered by never coming out to fight. Fitting in was his goal, and it was achieved until the left charges down the slippery slope, demanding new territory. He will then surrender again. And again, that's William Briggs, statistician to the stars, at his blog, wmbriggs.com. And I should plug his excellent book, new book, Everything You Believe Is Wrong. No op-ed such as Douthit's would be complete without a reference to a truly wise man, and I guess that would be Andrew Sullivan, who wrote a book back in the 90s called Virtually Normal. See, homosexuals are just like me and you. They are. No, they're not. They are almost at the antipodes to me and you. The things that they get up to are barely believable. They are completely, well, the male ones anyway, completely obsessed with sex. That's barely all they think about. But Andrew Sullivan, and he's been heard to lament that, this has gone too far. Men marrying men and the state being forced to acknowledge it. No, that's not going too far. It's the stuff that happened afterwards. And look, here's something that most people know. Everyone should know it. Gay marriage, gay monogamy? No. Nope. It doesn't exist. I suppose there are homosexual married couples out there who, each of them is not having sex with other people. There's a reason for that, because they're too poor to afford it. But no, gotta talk up Andrew Sullivan, because he is just so very reasonable. Mark Levin. Mark Levin is not very smart for a Jew, I must say. This is from Chris Menahan from Information Liberation. Fox News host Mark Levin went full neocon Sunday night, attacking so-called nationalist populists as un-American isolationists and ordering viewers to reject both ideologies as dangerous and disconnected from the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. How could nationalism have anything to do, for or against in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution? Levin said, I have in front of me the pocket edition of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. Good for you. The word nationalist cannot be found in either the Declaration or the Constitution. Why is this? There's lots of words that can't be found in the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution of the United States. Despite the Supreme Court's 1973 verdict in Roe v. Wade, strangely enough, the word abortion does not appear in the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution of the United States. Mark Levin I don't know that he's a serious man. He's certainly not a very bright one. He continued, because the people who founded your country and the people, the framers of your Constitution, were not nationalists. They were Americans. Oh, I see. These two terms are mutually exclusive, are they? So what am I saying? Am I a globalist? Levin asked. Ooh, really throwing down the gauntlet there, Mark. I don't even know what that means. Yeah, that's because you're dumb. No, I'm a red-blooded American constitutionalist who believes in capitalism and representative government. Is there anything about capitalism? Yeah. In the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, does it say the United States of America shall have an economic system, capitalism? Does it say that? What does that mean? Levin asked. It's simple. You don't treat communist China the way you treat Great Britain when it comes to trade. Again, what does that have to do with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution? You don't send advanced technologies to Russia or to Iran, technologies you might send to Israel. Fun fact. The modern state of Israel did not exist at the time of the writing of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Modern state of Israel came into being about more than 150 years later, but it's in there somewhere. You use your noggin. Because Mark Levin's a regular guy. I bet he uses the word folks a lot. Use your common sense. That's what you do. He continued, let's move this into foreign policy. I keep hearing this line still. What do you want us to get into war with Russia over Ukraine? And these people pretend to be conservatives and they say, America first, America first. These are the prominent people who know not of what they speak. They're going to surrender this century to communist China with their idiocy, with their lack of foresight. What a maroon. Paul Gottfried, who is a exceedingly intelligent Jew, commented on Mark Levin back August 30th of last year in Chronicles. A devastating leftist critique of Mark Levin's best-selling book, American Marxism, was posted by Zachary Patrizzo at a salon the other day. After reading Patrizzo's remarks, I'm left wondering about the colossal foolishness of Levin, who set out to write a book which his celebrity would push to the top of the New York Times bestseller list on something it seems he never bothered to study. Patrizzo notes that Levin refers to the Frankfurt School, which he attacks as the main source of American Marxist pollution, as the Franklin School. Did his editors didn't catch that? Levin also seems to be blissfully unaware that this school of radical social theory, which he purports to be investigating, developed in the German city of Frankfurt, not Berlin, after World War I. Furthermore, Levin blames my former professor, Herbert Marcuse, for hatching this dangerous radical theory, which turned Marxism into racially divisive ideology. But as Patrizzo notes, the critical theory in question was constructed by multiple theorists going back to the 1920s. In its earlier, more traditional forms, it had nothing to do with black-white confrontations in the United States. Marcuse's contribution to the Frankfurt School theory was hardly foundational, as one learns from reading Rolf Wiggershaus's massive study of this enterprise, which is now available in English. Marcuse achieved prominence as an exponent of the Frankfurt School theory, mostly after World War II, and his strongest influence was in the United States, to which he immigrated in the 1930s. Since Levin is a TV entertainer, it wouldn't be surprising that he would not be aware of all these facts, but one might expect his editors to have noticed and corrected his more embarrassing errors. One does not have to be a trained research scholar to pick them up. As Salon points out, a search on Wikipedia would have turned up Levin's more egregious bloopers in a few minutes. It seems the now familiar combination of self-importance and intellectual vulgarity that characterizes conservatism as media entertainment may be what lies behind this botched work. The performers should limit themselves to what they do best, which is entertaining, for they are neither equipped nor predisposed to pursue scholarly research. And let's go to the chat. Berkan Sultanov Hello says, I've read Horkheimer, Adorno, Fromm, and Marcuse and found it interesting. Oh, well, yes, there are many interesting things and useful things to be found in the works of one who you ultimately oppose. I mean, Gottfried has admitted it. Any sane man would admit it. Dialectic of enlightenment savagely critiques instrumental rationality, says Berkan Sultanov. Quacholango, hello, says, okay, I'm not a gossip monger, but I have the juiciest piece of gossip ever in the history of the KMG channel. Well, do tell. True Greenbird, hello, says, concept like one-dimensionality and repressive desublimation can be easily repurposed by rightists. Someone said that they thought he misspelled Frankfurt School so that people wouldn't Google it. Hello to Brandon Smith. Don Willis is a fan of the Low Riders. How much longer is the term bestseller going to carry weight? We know it is an empty term with all the tricks used, says Phil the Kill. The New York Times is particularly guilty of that, actually. I read an amusing story about Alec Baldwin a couple of years ago, that Baldwin's wife, Ilaria, it's actually Hillary, but she insists it's pronounced Ilaria because she's actually Spanish, but she isn't. She'd written a book on exercise or something like that, exercise and diet, and the book was stiff. And Alec Baldwin appears to be quite fond of his wife, who has given him, 5 or 6 healthy children? And so he decided to buy a large number of copies of this book so that it appeared on the bestseller list. And of course, when you get on the bestseller list, it means that people buy your books for real. But I gather that Alec Baldwin was quite out of pocket for this act of wifely devotion, or husbandly devotion, rather. The problem is that when Ilaria discovered that her book had appeared on the bestseller list, she said, well, I'm going to write another one then. A bestseller in Canada? You know what constitutes a bestseller in my country? 4,000 copies. Hello, Oscar Toe says, I'm not a wiener or a hot dog. I'm a Frankfurter. Mark Levin. Jonathan Ferguson, hello, says, Rolling Thunder on Parliament Hill this weekend. The first event starts Friday at 5 p.m. Be there or be a globalist. Rumor has it that Mark Levin is Brian Stelter's dad. That's funny. Jonathan Ferguson says the word pedophile isn't in these documents either. That doesn't mean we shouldn't execute them when they're found guilty in a fair trial. In Minecraft, okay. No, look, this is the same sort of argument that you hear from those people, soi-disant Christians, justifying, homosexuality or abortion. Well, Jesus never said it. The Gospels are not the Koran. There is not all that much of Jesus. It's not meant to be a full account of his life or everything he did or said. And if you don't understand that, you don't know anything about Christianity. Phil LaKill says, I think we know why Levin hates American populism. God forbid the U.S. takes a keen interest in itself. Oh, this is good from Oscar Toe. Mark Levin is the living Constitution. Mark Levin isn't very smart, says Professor Pohl, Kakwa Pajavaitia, but compared to Jason Stanley, he is a mega brain. Conservatives are always ready to get their KISS records out, says Anran. That's, of course, a Cheap Trick reference. And do we have anyone else new here? True Greenberg says homosexuality was depathologized in 1973 because homosexuals protested and put pressure on the APA et al. So they fought the science and won, and then they determined the science. Look, homosexuality is not a mental problem. It is a moral problem. And I just think that it's not only a gross error, but it is grossly immoral to treat moral problems as medical or psychiatric problems. So where's this gossip that we were promised? I can't. Oh, okay. What is it here? Where is it? I heard that your bro Oberonwall had an affair with Claire Kaw. I don't know anything about that. I'm fairly certain it's been reported in a book about him. It seems an approved book. It's a weird sort of combination of biography and bits from his works that Oberonwall had an affair with a young Tina Brown. What is Alec Baldwin's best movie? I'm going to go with State and Maine. That's an answer to Palpicasso 88. Okay. And now we're going to return to Tainters. Joseph Tainter's The Collapse of Complex Societies. And this is the section, chapter 6, on understanding collapse. Overall economic productivity. Per capita rates of economic growth decline with increasing GNP, so that as the economy of a society expands, its rate of growth slows down. Various economists attribute this in large part to the cost of producing technical knowledge. It has been suggested that high growth rates use up the existing backlog of knowledge, so that growth thereafter must rely on the rate at which new knowledge is created. Growth, therefore, follows a logistic curve. Middle-income nations develop a faster growth rate because they're able to simply absorb knowledge and technology developed elsewhere. This is an interesting perspective, although it may not be readily applicable to the non-capitalist economies of early complex societies. There are, however, reasons to suspect that there is more behind declining economic growth than simply using up existing knowledge. It may well be that an overall trend of declining marginal productivity in a society simply leaves proportionately less capital for investment in future growth. Consider, for example, the plight of a society that must simultaneously face declining marginal productivity in any combination of the following: agriculture, minerals and energy extraction, science, education, and information processing, size and costs of civil and military organizations, upkeep of capital stock, such as monumental architecture, or more practical things like aqueducts and bridges, etc. As each of these spheres requires an increased proportion of the society's budget, the portion available for investment in future growth must decline. Such a condition is more likely to characterize a country that has been growing for some time than a newly emerging nation just entering a phase of growth. Productivity growth is highly dependent on research and development, which, like any scientific endeavor, is susceptible to declining marginal returns. Cost records from 17 research laboratories from 1950 to 1960, compiled by Alice Johnson and Helen Milton, show that a doubling of R&D activity was gained only by an investment that grew 450%. Productivity growth requires technical innovation, but in the United States, each 1% increase in the rate of cumulative R&D can yield an increase in the rate of technical change of only 0.1 to 0.7%. And once basic innovations have been achieved, derivative work and improvement innovations occur at high cost with a declining marginal return. Explaining collapse. At the beginning of this chapter, it is proposed that 4 concepts would lead to an understanding of collapse. These are: 1, human societies are problem-solving organizations; 2, sociopolitical systems require energy for their maintenance; 3, increased complexity carries with it increased cost per capita; and 4, investment in sociopolitical complexity as a problem-solving response often reaches a point of declining marginal returns. The first 3 points may be thought of as the conceptual underpinnings of the fourth, which is the crucial element in the explanation. A society increasing in complexity does so as a system. That is to say, as some of its interlinked parts are forced in a direction of growth, others must adjust accordingly. For example, if complexity increases to regulate regional subsistence production, investments will be made in hierarchy, in bureaucracy, and in agricultural facilities, such as irrigation networks. The expanding hierarchy requires still further agricultural output for its own needs, as well as increased investment in energy and minerals extraction. An expanded military is needed to protect the assets thus created, requiring in turn its own increased sphere of agricultural and other resources. As more and more resources are drained from the support population to maintain this system, an increased share must be allocated to legitimization or coercion. This increased complexity requires specialized administrators who consume further shares of subsistence resources and wealth. To maintain the productive capacity of the base population, further investment is made in agriculture, and so on. This illustration could be expanded, tracing still further the interdependencies within such a growing system, but the point has been made. A society grows in complexity as a system. To be sure, there are instances where one sector of society grows at the expense of others, but to be maintained as a cohesive whole, a social system can tolerate only certain limits to such conditions. Thus, it is possible to speak of sociocultural evolution by the encompassing term complexity, meaning by this the interlinked growth of the several subsystems that comprise a society. This growth carries an associated energy cost, which before the development of fossil fuel economies was largely met by human labor. Growth also yields an array of benefits, including administration of resource storage and distribution, investment in agricultural, energy and minerals production, internal order and external defense, information processing, and public works. Growth in benefits relative to costs will regularly follow a curve, which is to say that at some point in the evolution of a society, continued investment in complexity as a problem-solving strategy yields a declining marginal return. Let us examine this proposition in more detail, which we will do on tomorrow's show when we return to Joseph Tainter's The Collapse of Complex Societies. Oh, yes. There is an attempt being made in my country to conflate, really, the so-called insurrection that happened at the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. Last year on January 6th with a bunch of truckers and their trucks showing up in Ottawa for a few weeks. Yes, this is really happening. Susan Delacourt, who is as close to approved opinion in Canada as one can find. I mean, if you want to know what our elites are thinking or what they're going to think, read Susan Delacourt. This woman has never had an original opinion in her life, but she is nonetheless valuable, because to know received opinion, well, then you know what the game really is. She thunders in the Toronto Star. How much did the trucker convoy threaten Canada's security? We may never really know. I'm scared. For Canada's international allies, what? Notably in the United States, what? The 9 days of official emergency in February also represented a serious test of Canada's democratic health. Yes, because people in the United States and other countries in the world were scratching their chins and going, yes, this truckers' protest seems to be going on for rather a long time, and now a national emergency has been declared. I think that this represents a serious test of Canada's democratic health. Don't you, Leon? A short 2 months ago, Canada was in the grips of a national emergency, an unprecedented 3-week-long occupation of its capital city. Now, the formal reckoning for that state of emergency is underway. It's not just a domestic political exercise, one promising to churn up all of those freedom issues currently bouncing around the federal conservative leadership race. For Canada's international allies, yes, we heard that bit. Oh, freedom in scare quotes. All of Canada's elites puts the word freedom in scare quotes, just like they put free speech in scare quotes, because they know better than that. Speaking of the Canadian elite, Andrew Coyne, who's been around, oh God, forever, and used to be called a right-winger or a conservative or libertarian or whatever. He's a process nerd and a statist. And he is just furious at Pierre Poilievre and the numbers that he's bringing out to his rallies. And his keyboard must have been covered with spittle after he finished this piece 4 days ago in the Globe and Mail. Pierre Poilievre taps into the textbook populism, conjuring unseen enemies in the place of real solutions. Andrew Coyne has no real solutions. Anytime a Canadian party has ever suggested doing something differently, Andrew Coyne, who about once or twice a year writes a column lamenting that no Canadian parties have any original ideas, and one of them does, Andrew Coyne tells us that's dangerous. Until about 5 minutes ago, the conventional wisdom on Pierre Poilievre was, can he win the party? Can win the party, can't win the country. Sure, he might thrill the conservative base, but to Mr. and Mrs. Moderate voter, he was about as appealing as a cold sore. Only a fool would bet on him becoming prime minister. The new conventional wisdom, only a fool would bet against it. You see, Andrew Coyne gave absolutely no thought to the possibility that what Pierre Poilievre has to say, which is not a surprise because he's been saying it for quite a long time, might resonate with the Conservative Party base. And then when it turned out that it did, oh, yes, the conventional wisdom has changed. No, conventional wisdom didn't change. It's just that Andrew Coyne started to pay attention. So maybe Poilievre's crowds are evidence of a hitherto undetected groundswell of popular support beyond his existing base. Or maybe it's just the same story as before. He excites the excitable. Actually, in politics, it's good to have excitable people on your side because they're the people who are willing to put in the work. Anyone can raise their hand and go, yep, yeah, sure. You want people with energy. But everything surrounding Andrew Coyne and his thought is enervated. Let's see, effete, one might say. Do you know what that word originally means? It means exhausted by childbirth. Part of Poilievre's appeal is genuinely cross-partisan and non-ideological voters, or whatever the stripe, are drawn to a candidate who's not apologized for who he is, who stands up for himself and his beliefs, whatever others may say of him or them, who is, as they say, authentic. Is Pierre Poilievre authentic? Just as we are now living in an age when people have been told they have to do and pay for a lot of things they don't want to. They have to? Why do they have to? Because of the worldwide COVID pandemic? No. Because of the panic, the sheer hysteria over a minor respiratory illness. This is why this happened. They have to get vaccinated. Oh, and how did that work out? Or wear a mask. How did that work out? Because of global warming, they have to pay a carbon tax. Yeah, it's just become intolerably hot in Canada. And even as I speak, Victoria is being inundated by the Pacific Ocean. These are large enough impositions to be annoying, yet small enough individually. You creep. You creep. Oh, I'm sorry, you're going to have to shut your business down. Why? Because it's not essential. Says who? The experts. On what basis? They have their reasons. I'm going to have to shut my business down for how long? See how it goes. What if I, lose enough money and such like so that my business goes under permanently? Well, you don't want everyone to die, do you? Andrew Coyne just tapped away at his laptop in his Toronto home or his apartment or whatever. And inconvenience? Oh, I suppose that, if he went to buy groceries, he might have to spend longer in line, we went to the drugstore or liquor store, might have to spend longer in line. Of course, you can have those things delivered to you now. So when a candidate comes along who tells them, in effect, you don't have to pay the carbon tax, you don't have to get vaccinated because these problems we're meant to address can either be waved away or ignored. Well, of course, a certain kind of voter is going to get very excited about that. Well, it turns out that Andrew Cohen's precious vaccine is not so efficacious, not so safe. In fact, the latest data from England, I'll repeat it again, and you can find this at Alec Berenson's Substack. Almost 90% of those hospitalized in the latest figures from England, fully vaccinated and beyond. Over 90% of those dying, deaths attributed to COVID-19 in England, over 90% of those deaths were among those fully vaccinated and beyond. Oh, by the way, Kamala Harris has COVID-19. Guess how many times she has got the mRNA experimental jab? 4 times. You see how efficacious it is? And when this feckless abdication of responsibility is dressed up as a principled devotion to freedom, again with the scare quotes, then yes, the same people are going to get even more excited. People like to feel good about themselves. They like to feed their refusal to make sacrifices, however infinitesimal. Oh, you creep. For the common good is not because they are lazy or selfish or paranoid, but in the service of some larger ideal. Turns out Andrew Cohen has never believed in freedom. That if some latrine walla said that we just discovered that for health reasons, everyone has to wear green socks on Thursday, Andrew Cohen would say, well, you had better, because you're selfish if you don't. This is just an infinitesimal sacrifice, just like people losing their businesses or people losing their jobs. These are infinitesimal sacrifices. People were bullied, coerced, terrorized into getting vaccines, which turns out are not so efficacious and not so safe. But Andrew Cohen, elites, gatekeepers, elites, global elites, these are all in scare quotes. And he's just, the notion, likewise, that he stands for a particularly robust form of conservatism. What on earth would Andrew Cohen know about conservatism as properly understood? In fairness, he has made some policy disclosures, as Pierre Poilievre. For example, he said that he would not touch supply management. Ooh, Andrew Cohen gets very tingly inside when the topic of supply management comes up. Perhaps the single most example of privileged gatekeepers using the power of the state to stick it to the little guy. Yeah, let's not have one like Canadian market. Of course, Andrew Cohen wants one global market, so economies of scale can be used to crush local businesses, because that's what real conservatism is. I get why this sort of thing, he concludes, like his endorsement of the anti-vaxxers, excites the fringes. He did not endorse the anti-vaxxers. He endorsed the rights of preserving the rights of people who did not get vaccinated. For instance, to cross the border driving a truck. It might even be enough to carry him to the party leadership. It's just not clear why it makes him a serious contender for a prime minister. Of course, I don't know who he voted for in the last election, but he voted for the NDP candidate. That is to say, the the neo or crypto socialist party. If you take a look at, I'm going to Pierre Poilievre's site. I just made an effort to pronounce his name properly in French, Poilievre, but I found out that he is pronouncing it Poilievre. Okay. After having made the effort, it's going to be difficult for me. So let's go to his page, More Canadian Paychecks. This is policy. Reclaim Canadian values. Stop just inflation. Fire the gatekeepers. Reclaim Canadian values. What might they be? Do you know who should be determining Canadian values? Canadians. Instead, we have a small group of ruling elites who claim to possess moral superiority and the burden of instructing the rest of us how to live our lives. They're wrong. We need to get back to the basics. Oh, boo-grown hiss. It's time to stand up for fundamental Canadian values and protect Canadians' freedom of speech and belief. Short of getting rid of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, I don't know how that could be achieved. Note lack of specifics. You know who should be determining Canadian values? Canadians. He says, you know who largely determines Canadian values now? Foreigners. And Pierre Poilievre, who is married to a foreigner, well, he would understand that Pierre Poilievre has no difficulty with 450,000 new people coming to Canada. Those are permanent new people. That doesn't include all the temporary ones coming to Canada every single year. No difficulty with that at all. In fact, he wants to bully provincial governments so that professional qualifications from all over the world would be accepted by them. Because I know, I certainly do, and I know that you do, if you're listening to me from Canada, you know, you want a doctor from, you know, Guinea-Bissau or Myanmar, right? I mean, what Canadian doesn't? We need to unleash the fierce power of the Canadian workforce and bring our economy roaring back. Oh, my free enterprise. Cut the overbearing red tape and regulation. They always say that. They always say that. Break down interprovincial trade barriers. Yep. Let's just have one market. More Canadian paychecks. Well, with this, you know, 450,000 to 1 million new people coming, with all the hundreds of thousands coming in as so-called temporary workers, that's not going to mean more Canadian paychecks, is it, Pierre Poilievre? It's all cringe with this guy. It's a crypto. Oh, he wants to make Canada the crypto Canada of the world. What does that even mean? Oh, and there he is vaping or smoking kush or whatever. And again, free enterprise. If this is the fellow who is scaring the Canadian elite, that gives you, you know, a very good indication of just how weak the Canadian elite is. Who could possibly be afraid of that guy? And let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay. I don't want to talk about the Charter of Rights. I'll just say this. Okay. It's the 40th anniversary of the Charter of Rights, which is Canada 2.0. Formerly, we had common law. Well, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms got rid of common law. Now we have positivist law. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms gave the Canadian judiciary, which of course is unelected and unaccountable, the power to rewrite Canada's laws, to read in things to the Constitution which are not in the Constitution. So therefore, the people of Canada are no longer sovereign. Our major decisions are made by judges. Did the Canadian people vote to legalize prostitution? No, they did not. Did the Canadian people vote to legalize physician-assisted murder, aka euthanasia? No, they did not. Did the Canadian people vote that if decisions made, social conservative issues, if you want to characterize them as that, are made by people with religious beliefs, that these decisions made by school boards are illegal? No, the Canadian people did not vote for that. Did the Canadian people vote to eliminate free speech? No, they did not. I'm going to mention a man called John Ross Taylor, and I know a little bit about him because I used to work for a lawyer called Doug Christie, famous free speech lawyer. And there was a court decision regarding him in 1990, R. V. Taylor. Now, I don't suppose John Ross Taylor was a particularly pleasant fellow, but he was found, I'll just read from Wikipedia here. In the 1980s, Taylor was twice found in contempt of court for refusing to comply with a 1979 order by the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal to end his recorded white power messages on the Western Guard Party's phone line. He was imprisoned from October 1981 to 1982, and again later in the decade for violating the Canadian Human Rights Act. In 1990, the Supreme Court of Canada upheld the ruling against Taylor in the landmark case R.V. Taylor. Okay. I've read the case, the verdict, and also the appendices. And including in the appendices are a list of the messages that was on his phone line. You called up and you got this white power message. It was pretty anodyne stuff. Most of it was along the lines of, hey, did you know that Jews were heavily represented in Bolshevik leadership? Well, actually, I do know that already. This is a true claim. The Supreme Court, based on our farcically named Charter of Rights and Freedoms, they said no, that John Ross Taylor was wrong. Why? Truth is not a defense to accusations of hate speech. I'm going to repeat that. In Canada, truth is not a defense to accusations of hate speech. Since pretty much everything now that someone doesn't like can be construed as hate speech, well, truly, there is no such thing as free speech in Canada, and our elite has made it clear that any speech they don't like, for instance, too many immigrants to come into this country, that constitutes hate speech, and this sort of talk should not be allowed. This did not prevent, just universal orgasms in the Canadian media and people patting themselves on the back for the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which once again eliminated our rights as Englishmen to common law and replaced it with American or French style positivist law. It took sovereignty from the people via their delegates and awarded it to unelected and unaccountable courts, who are now busy going about reading in to Canadian law Native Indian ownership of the country, or at least co-ownership of the country. And if you peruse the Constitution of Canada, you will find there is no justification for this whatsoever. The Constitution of Canada protects the rights of Indians that were given to them in their reserves. That's it. It doesn't say that Indians have consultative rights in all projects, such as natural resource projects. It says nothing of this sort. But our judges have now gone so far that Canadians are soon to lose sovereignty over their own country. So that's enough about Canada. I'm sorry. I don't like to talk about my country. It just makes me too angry. And I don't like to be angry on this show because it's supposed to be an entertainment. This is from Connor Boyd at the Daily Mail. A global surge in mysterious hepatitis cases may have been caused by lockdown and social distancing, health chiefs have warned, as cases in the United States rose to 11. Officials probing the outbreak in Britain said a lack of exposure to common infections during their formative years may have left more children than usual vulnerable to the deadly liver disease. Many experts warned during the pandemic that locking down children, despite their low risk of severe COVID, could weaken their immunity against other illnesses, as well as hamper their education and long-term health. So far, 169 cases of acute hepatitis of unknown origin have been detected in 12 countries since last October, the World Health Organization has announced. The vast majority of cases have been among children aged 5 and under. What do you get hepatitis from? Heavy drinking, really heavy drinking, infecting your body. That's another way that you get it. Children getting hepatitis. That's really kind of a shocker. And let's go to Eugippius. Oh, and it's a tweet. And he has something to say about the Andrew Coynes of the world. Andrew Coyne has been an elite thinker in my country for 40 years or so, something like that. I'm really liking this Eugippius fellow. He is truly an original thinker. He wrote, "What is happening to us isn't a conspiracy. It's a fully legal pensioner coup. A bunch of olds in their terror of death condemn all of us to 2-year hygiene prison, and in their terror of penury, import third worlders to pay their retirement funds and staff their nursing homes. They are destroying the economy, our nations, and our future, but they don't care because they have guaranteed monthly income. They rarely travel or go outside, and they have no interest in what happens beyond 2030. We desperately need to find a way to get them out of power. How about shame? Has that been tried? I mean, it's worked in the past. I think that the power of shame is greatly underrated. And, oh, yes. Yeah, temple prostitutes. That's the media. You may have heard of this fellow, Franklin Foer. He used to be with Slate. He's now with The Atlantic. He's highly regarded, it seemed to me. I think he was with the New Republic to begin with. This is from Chris Menahan at Information Liberation. Former Slate journalist Franklin Foer, who currently works at The Atlantic, sent a draft copy of one of his propaganda pieces to Fusion GPS for editing, according to leaked emails highlighted by special counsel John Durham. Molly Hemingway at The Federalist comments, "Oh dear." David Jacobs had asked, "Is it common for a journalist to have a source edit their own story?" Molly Hemingway said, grave journalistic no-no. But for a propagandist participating in a hoax, probably standard operating procedure. And it's not the only time he's been caught doing with Fusion on a Russian collusion hoax story. Here's Franklin Foer going back and forth with Fusion GPS on Carter Page. I mean, look, this has to destroy the reputation of the media, or maybe it doesn't need to be destroyed because they don't have one. Maybe the reputation is only in their own minds. Chris Menahan points out that Foer is now writing propaganda pieces for The Atlantic, hailing the Zelensky regime as champions of liberalism. He tweeted, "In the spirit of Passover, I wrote about the miracle of Ukrainian survival and why it should give hope for liberalism." Are the Ukrainians really such great friends of the Jews? I wouldn't think so. Based on my reading of history, they have possibly killed more Jews than any other people on earth. And of course, we have the Azov Battalion, and Zelensky has said that, of course, Stepan Bandar is a Ukrainian hero. Well, the Azov Battalion, they really don't like the Jews. They really don't like Russians or Poles either. What they like is killing. And they wear Nazi symbols. And they give the Roman salute. And they have guns. And they are fierce fighters. Zelensky said 3 weeks ago his goal for Ukraine is not to become a liberal state, but instead a greater Israel. What could that possibly mean? This is from an April 5th story. President Vladimir Zelensky Tuesday announced his goal for Israel is to turn it into a greater Israel. What? Ukraine will not become a liberal state in the near future, and the issues of security will become our number one priority, Zelensky said. Ukraine will definitely not be the same as we strived for from the very beginning. It's impossible. Completely liberal and European. It will not be like that. That doesn't sound very liberal at all, does it? It will definitely stand from the fortress of every house, every building, every person, he said during his interview with Ukrainian journalists. According to the head of state, Ukraine will become the greater Israel. Quote, "We will become a greater Israel with our own face." What? I mean, he's mad, right? I mean, how else can you describe him? This is completely mad. I'm going to wrap it up a little early today. I'll talk about Abercrombie and Fitch and their hate speech disguised as clothing tomorrow, because this story from MSNBC via Netflix documentary is just too amusing to pass up. Okay, final look at the chat. New Republic, okay, in 1990, says Quachilango. I started subscribing to the New Republic in, the late 70s, early 80s, and I guess I subscribed to it for more than 15 years. When I was going to say Michael Lewis, it's not Michael Lewis. It's the fellow who was the first editor of Slate magazine. When he was in charge, it was a very readable publication. That is to say, Slate. Michael Kinsley is the fellow's name. I used to like him on Crossfire too. He seems quite a decent fellow, quite a sensible fellow, not given to demagoguery or stupid partisanship. And who else do we have in the chat? Weren't they insufferable on Clinton? Wasn't that when Glass was writing his lies? Asks Anrun. Yeah. Well, let's see. Was 1992 or 1996 presidential campaign? I've said this before. It was 96. I was reading The New Republic, and I was a political reporter then. And every issue, I just thought, this Glass fellow, he just gets the goods. This is tremendous stuff. And I was envious, green with envy. How come he gets this great stuff and I don't? And then I found out that he made it all up. Jay Blatarsky says, for a large part of history, there were more Jews living in Kiev than in Jerusalem. I like girls that wear Abercrombie and Fitch, says a true Greenberg. Who else? AIDS and... Okay. All right. Contra-coup, hello. Pfizer internal data shows a large fraction of the mRNA nanolipids aggregate in the liver 24 to 72 hours after injection, but I'm sure that's unrelated to the increase in liver inflammation, i.e. hepatitis. And last shot I got was a Hep B shot. Boxing in my youth, blood diversity. My parents were concerned, says Phil the Kill. Your mama says, KMG, did you hear Zelensky give a paschal message and said Christ is risen? No, I did not. Hello to Lamprey Melt. So you being pissy makes great entertainment? Is that a reference to me? Anron says, I'm sure Kevin didn't follow the recent fentanyl doctor murder case in Ohio, but I wonder if he could have found that to be youth in Asia. Musk is part Jewish. I wonder how he'll handle criticism of Jewish hegemony, says Drew Greenberg. I don't know. How does common law relate to natural law, if at all? I really can't go into that. Natural law has to do with more than God's law. God's law, common law, has to do with the accumulated legal wisdom, legal tradition of a country or a nation. Glengarry Glen Ross, says Anrun, a best Alec Baldwin movie. Okay. Okay. That's it. I'm going to wrap it up for today because I have to be off somewhere. It's the one day of the week in which I, go out. Well, I mean, not literally go out, but go out to meet people or persons. So thank you all for tuning in. Greatly appreciated. As always, I shall be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you enjoyed the live stream and like to make a donation, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, donations may be made to the live stream directly via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.